Hey there, it's Boice. You're listening to my podcast, Talk Music Talk. Thank you for checking it out. If this happens to be your very first time, Talk Music Talk is a weekly music interview podcast where I have long-form conversations with people connected to music from different genres and different backgrounds, established and emerging, people who make music, people behind the scenes, music therapists, music journalists. And on this new episode, I had the pleasure of speaking to jazz saxophonist Caleb Wheeler Curtis. We met a couple of years ago at a holiday party, a Christmas party held by Sarah Elizabeth Charles, an amazing vocalist and songwriter, jazz themed and everything else. One of my favorite artists. She has been interviewed the most times on Talk Music Talk, so just a shout out to her. But we met at her party, and I reconnected with him when I found out about his wonderful debut as a band leader, which is called Brothers. Had a great time actually talking to him beyond 5 minutes at a Christmas party. This is a great conversation, very musically inclined. We talk about his entry into jazz. We talk about gaining confidence through playing and learning music, growing as an artist, improvisation. We talk about being discouraged to write music by an early instructor and how eventually he overcame that setback. And of course, we talk about the making of Brothers. And after the conversation, you are going to hear two songs from Brothers, the title track and the Fallacy of Ancient Wisdom. Here it is, without further ado, my conversation with Caleb Wheeler Curtis. Enjoy. This has inevitably come up when I interview people who make jazz, or I'll do jazz in quotes. And there's always like, oh, what is jazz? And some people don't believe in that term, even though they may make music that most people would fall into that category. So I'm wondering, like, what is jazz to you? Or do you even think about that?
I don't worry about it too much.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with the music I make being called jazz. So many of my favorite musicians are called jazz musicians.
Yeah.
Even if they didn't like the term, I guess. A lot of people take the opportunity to make some kind of statement about what is important to them culturally or musically by calling it something else. But I don't really take issue with that.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a very descriptive term, because it means so much that it doesn't really tell you very much when someone says something's jazz. I mean, when even you have Frank Sinatra and Ornette Coleman. Yeah. Those things, they share something.
Both make jazz.
Yeah, but if those are both jazz, then it doesn't tell you very much about the music. And I find a lot of times people want to know the name of a genre or the name of a subgenre as if that's going to really tell them anything about the music.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's not a very great way to even discover music, I don't think. But
it's a way for people to box it and then decide. Because if someone's like, oh, I really don't care for jazz. So as soon as you say jazz, which doesn't even tell you anything, right?
Yeah.
They can already decide, well, no, I don't like that, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, that doesn't help anybody.
No.
And mostly, it's a joke among musicians that people say, well, I don't like jazz, but I liked your concert.
Yeah, like,
all my jazz musicians, and we're like, yeah, well, I think maybe you do like jazz.
Yes.
And you just been mistaken, or what you heard as jazz was presented to you in a weird way, or in a funny moment, or in as if it was corny or old or something, stale. Yeah. And I don't get that from jazz at all. Well, I mean, sometimes I have to think of exceptions, but mostly, I mean, the music that I hold near and dear, that I consider jazz, is none of those things.
Yeah. What was your entry to jazz?
I think my grandfather was a hobbyist saxophone player, and so I must have heard some jazz through him. But early, I remember my dad bought me a lot of jazz records, Blue Train by John Coltrane, and some other unusual ones. And somehow I gravitated to that, and that's what I listened to. So I missed any songs on the radio between, through the 90s and 2000s, because I was listening to Art Blakey and Cannonball Adderley. So I remember specifically one time I got in the car with my dad, and he put on So What? Yeah. And they play the refrain. and he told me the name of the song, and I was like, oh, cool.
Yeah.
It's like a musical thing that says the same.
Yeah.
And I just was somehow attracted to that. I don't know.
Was the attraction immediate, or did you have to learn jazz? Have an ear for it?
I think I learned how to feel like a deep attachment. It took me a long time to really feel like I was making my own choices about what I really liked, and to feel sort of protective of those things as if they were really personal. Because it's easy when people are teaching you about something to just take on their personality or their musical and their musical tastes and values, because they're so committed and convinced. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think it's probably true with a lot. I never really doubted that if I liked it or not. I always was finding more and always more interested. But I'm not sure it was until I was in New York, even all the way through college, that I really started to feel my own deep personal attachment to it. Because, of course, you're dealing with life, and there's the music following with you. And you're discovering things and listening when you're at jobs you don't want to be at, and these sorts of things that it keeps you grounded. Was Coltrane the artist for you, the first one, or? I don't know.
Was there someone like that, or?
I don't know that there was. I mean, there are some early records that I think, more than it being about the artist, it was like those records. I had them. You know?
What were those?
Well, there was Blue Train, and there was a Lou Donaldson record called Blues Walk. And there was Verve used to put out these compilations of albums they called the Verve Jazz Masters Collection, and there was one for Rahsaan Roland Kirk that I had, which had all these. The music was a bit wilder than Blue Train or these other records, and somehow that's like a personal classic, you know. But definitely saxophone players for whatever reason. And once I started playing, you know, I had to really fight to play saxophone when I started in 5th grade, because they wanted me to play trumpet, and my mom went in with me, you know, under her arm, and she was like, "No, he wants to play saxophone." And we had to fight for it. But somehow I felt that. Even though I don't think I felt that strongly about anything at that time. I was 11. You know?
So the sax came as a result of the love for the jazz.
It was around the same time. I wonder if my dad was going, oh, he's going to start playing an instrument maybe, and playing some jazz records and see, I don't know. But I don't remember being that strong-willed or having that much resolve as a kid. I was more just like, everything was so straight, like, I didn't have a difficult childhood, you know? So it was...
You're in the minority.
I'm lucky in that regard, you know, but it took me some time to feel like that something was really important to me. You know, maybe... I spent a lot of time and really enjoyed playing, and I worked hard at other things, but it wasn't. I didn't feel this internal drive in that way. More, it was like, oh, I like this. You know, I'll keep doing this.
How old were you when you started?
I guess 11, 10, or 5th grade. I don't know how old kids are. But I started in the public school band in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and there was something about it that I liked. I was curious and interested and tried to play things I had no business playing, and started taking lessons with a teacher who didn't know how to teach me, really. We had a moment where I was like, hey, look, I wrote some music, and at home I had printed out some staff paper or something and wrote a melody, and I brought it to him, and he said, you don't know how to write music. That's not how you write at all. And so I didn't do it anymore. And it was like, man, what a terrible thing to do to your student.
Well, that's right. It's great you recognize that, because how many people would stop because this teacher said it?
Well, I stopped for many years. And
really?
I remembered later, because as a kid, I was really worried about being wrong. I was really embarrassed if I was wrong or did something, I don't know. I didn't want to raise my hand in class and those sorts of things. I was shy. So when he told me I didn't know how to write music, why was I doing that? I was like, oh, well, then I won't. And so much later, when I was teaching some kids, I thought, man, if a kid came to me with some music they wrote down, that'd be thrilling.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Who cares if they don't know what they're doing? Encourage them to do more, and then they can learn. So, anyway,
how long did you stop?
I don't think I started to write music again until I was in college.
Okay.
Yeah. It felt too far away. I didn't know how to control the elements. I didn't know how to, I didn't know what to do. Yeah. And then I was afraid if we were going to play something, I was afraid it was going to be dumb. And then, so there's a little bit of self-judgment there. Yeah.
So how did you get over that?
I guess from necessity, but music gave me a way out of being shy, because I remember my first public gig, I guess was in 6th grade. I was in the middle school jazz band. Yeah. We played at the mall, and we played some 3 or 4 songs, and I was terrified, but I did it. And it was way easier for me than it would have been to get up there and speak in front of people or anything. And so it was an opportunity to sort of to get over that fear.
Okay.
And over the years, I was able to lose a lot of that because because I had to. I remember my first gig that I was the leader on, and I had to speak. It was just in the back of a bar, and I was like, so the music has been my way through all of that to find some amount of confidence, to find some amount of being relaxed, or also to let go of whether or not I was correct, or whether I was saying something silly or embarrassing or whatever.
Yeah.
And I found the more that I'm transparent as transparent as possible, the more I like what I say, the more I like what I play, the more it seems to connect with people, because you're not reading a script that you don't know how to write, or playing someone else's music. You know what I mean? It's like, and in the end, people like when people are straightforward and honest.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. Transparency.
Yeah.
So, were you able to take that confidence that you were gaining on stage? Does it just get better on stage, or are you able to move that around in other areas of your life?
Oh, I think eventually to move it around, I was able to move it around a little bit, and the more accountability I had with the music, the more I could, I think one of the great things about music is that you have to identify your weaknesses and work on them. And musicians have to do that forever. Yeah. And a lot of people don't have that gift of having to look at themselves so much. I mean, not in the mirror, but to self-analyze and figure out where you're causing yourself difficulty and harm and all those things. And also I think consequently, as you get better at those things in your life, then the music gets better. Okay. So it's a little bit of a feedback loop. Yeah. And also musicians like to talk about that stuff, because if you're, and when you're getting on stage to perform, or when you're going to practice, if there's too much in your head and you can't let go and you can't focus on the task at hand in the moment, then you're going to really struggle. Or you'll be sort of detached, and and then it's hard to enjoy it. And if you're not enjoying playing music, then why are you doing it? I mean, obviously it's hard sometimes, but it should be enjoyed. Yeah, definitely.
Oh God! So it's like, how did you get better? I mean, now to be practicing. Like, were you thinking of a career in music, or like this is more than a hobby?
Well, when I was studying, I guess I knew I wanted to go to study in college, and I followed a very close friend of mine who's a year older than me. He went to school to Michigan State University, and then I was like, I could be roommates with him. So I went there, and I liked the teachers, and I think it was jazz studies, saxophone. Yeah, I think I was just following the thread of something that I liked, and I imagined that I would always play. And about halfway through college, I started to go, you know what, if I'm not going to really commit to this, if I have enough energy to study something else and do other things, maybe I should add a science major or something, or digital communications or something. But by the time I got to the end of that school year, that wasn't true anymore.
Yeah.
And then, so that sort of snowballed from there. And then when I took the leap and moved to New York, that was like, okay, well, now it's really on. Mm-hmm. And that first year I was here was, it was exciting and intense, and I was really practicing more than I ever had. And so now I feel like I'm losing your question. You asked how I got better.
Yeah, how did you get better? Like, and was that the goal of being a musician, working musician?
Right. Yeah. Well, I think the goal changes. Mm-hmm. I've always wanted to get better at playing and at the instrument, but sometimes that goal was for, I want to get better so I get more gigs, so I can make more money, so I can support myself playing, or so that I want to get better at this so that I can get called by that person or for, this scenario. Yeah. And over time, my desire to get better for other people has waned. Mm-hmm. And now I'm just more, I want to get better at the things that are interesting to me. Yeah. And then hopefully that will lead to whatever it leads to. Yeah. And I try not to think, I want everything to get better. Yeah. The music and my life and everything. And as long as it feels like always, if I look back like a year ago, oh, it's better than it was a year ago, then I'm cool with that. I think some people think, in 10 years I want X thing, or I want to live in this place, I want to be playing with so-and-so, I want to be making X money. And then when you get to 10 years from now and your goals have changed or your priorities changed in the meantime, but you still failed at your goal from 10 years before. But why would the person that you were 10 years ago know what you would want in 10 years? Yes. And I think the idea that you're like that you would have to be so consistent is a drag, because how are you going to grow then? I mean, I guess some people really know, but I've never had that feeling that, I want to hit all these marks on the way. Because it could be too easy to be like, oh, well, I'm a failure now because I didn't reach this goal from 5 years ago, when if you keep yourself open to life and how that can affect new goals or variation of that goal. Or even things that happen that you accomplished or happened to you that weren't a goal, that were just as valuable as any goal you could have had. That's way more interesting to me than... and that you couldn't predict it. And things that I hold on that are very important to me, relationships I have with people, and they're not the people I would have expected to have relationships with necessarily. The music isn't the music I would have expected to make. I'm not sure that the me from 15 years ago would like the music I make that much. But that's fine. That's cool, that means that I changed a little. That my experiences in life had a little bit of an effect on what I wanted on what music I wanted to make. Okay. Yeah. Well, did you get some good things out of college while you were there for your music? Totally. Yeah. I mean, I don't think I had a very good idea about how to be self-directed in terms of learning and studying. And it was easy for me in that time to, like I said, take on the values of my teachers. And they were very passionate about those values. So I learned how to care deeply about the end result of the music, about how to work hard towards achieving musical goals, and how to, I studied a lot of saxophone players that, it was like, okay, well, what we did a lot of is learn solos. So they would say 1 week, okay, learn this solo for next week. And next week, you'd come in and play. Great, learn this one. Okay. And that just went on and on and on and on and on. And which is how it goes. I mean, either whether you're learning solos or practicing some other way. But it gave me, I think, an understanding about what can be accomplished and how to... how to start to feel a personal connection to the music. And it gave me a foundation in jazz music that I'm very grateful for. I still value those things. They haven't been discarded. They've just been added to and expanded on. And so it was very important to me. And I don't think that I would have been able to do that without being in school. I think a lot of people, they're already self-directed, and going to college is not even necessary. Did you know that about yourself, that I need to be self-directed to grow at that point? I don't think I was that self-aware.
Yeah.
But I learned that. And I think it's sort of a shame that everyone feels like they have to go to college.
Yeah.
I would imagine that if I had lived for a lot of people, if you just go live your life and try to play music or do anything for 4 years is a long time.
Yeah.
And if college is approached like in the same way that people approach high school, then they might not really do anything.
I was the self-directing thing, but I was editing like their thesis, but their project for a book for nonfiction, and they were going to school for writing, and I didn't actually say that to them, but I was thinking their work reads like someone who doesn't read, and it's like they weren't going to learn necessarily how to write by being in school, so they're paying for school, but they don't read, and you could tell that, and it's like, well, you could not go to school, but if you read, that would affect your work in a
sure, and you would develop a personal attachment to your work, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there were a lot of musicians in music school who didn't listen to the music they were playing, and then it was like, well, how are you gonna like it?
Yeah,
or if you don't like it, then why are you studying it?
Yeah,
and that's very confusing.
So was the learning the solos, what was the skill for that? Or what were you supposed to learn from learning the solos?
Well, it's you learn what the feeling is. I mean, there's a few things that happen. First is that you develop your ears to hear nuance in the performances.
Okay.
So when you study something that closely, like maybe it takes 10, 15, 20 hours, depending on how hard the solo is, or that might take you that long just to figure out what the notes are. Then you have to learn how to play it.
Yeah.
And you're trying to play it along with them and try and basically as much of a full emulation as you can. And when you do it, then you have this feeling like it's your solo that you're playing.
Yeah.
And that experience gives you a little bit of access to what it maybe would have felt like to be in that band for a second, And in the process, you learn all of these other ways to be flexible with your sound and with your accuracy with your fingers and your articulation. And to make that sound yourself instead of just hearing it on a recording is powerful because it tells you, oh, I can do this also. I just have to learn how to generate it on my own.
Do you get to your own style by learning someone else's solos?
I think that I think it would be like reading classic literature or studying, if there were people that you loved, or even, you hear stories about people writing out books, like copying books out, right? And they, I think so. I think that you develop opinions about what you like. And then if you have, eventually you have to find some other processes.
Yeah.
And I was never really one who was then trying to go, when I would play, fully emulate someone else. That either I wasn't able to do it or it just wasn't that interesting to me. So, but yeah, sure. I think that most great musicians got there by emulating along the way, because otherwise how are you going to learn? I certainly, if you have extremely developed ears and you can hear a lot of detail from a young age, maybe you don't have to go through the process of learning all of that bit by bit because you can just tell what it is already.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
But I didn't have that. Yeah. So, I think that was fundamental to and also the way that the rhythm feels and the melodies feel and the way it sounds. And when you repeat it that many hours, that long, and it starts to get in your head, it's like studying a language.
Okay.
And just like if you're learning a language and you repeat words and sentences from native speakers because you're trying to sound like that.
Yeah.
Okay. I think it's like that.
Yeah, yeah. And was it in college when you went back to songwriting? Yeah,
I think I'm not sure I would say went back because there wasn't much of something
Begin
there. But
again?
But I started to at the direction of my teachers again.
Yeah.
I started to write some melodies and try to have them played, and maybe that was my sophomore year of college. And it was thrilling to have my friends play the songs and then have it feel like, oh, this is a song, actually. So it's been a development from there, and there's all sorts of layers to investigate in terms of how much, especially when there's so much improvising, like how much information do you provide?
Okay.
And if you provide very little, then you rely on the people that you're asking to play for their input in the moment.
Okay.
And if you provide a lot, then maybe you're giving them a lot of directions, and that leads to different results.
Okay. So would like the minimum be like you give them like the theme of the song and then they're off on their own?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the very minimum would be just a melodic line, and that's it. And then the next level would provide the harmony for that line.
Yeah.
And then, the least amount could just be like nothing. which is thrilling also. In those moments, it feels like the music just appears out of nowhere. And all of a sudden, everyone's playing, and you're going, well, I don't know, when did this start?
Yeah.
And how did we get to this moment?
Okay.
And I love that feeling too. But I also like a very minimal theme, like that first song on the album is it's just barely just two little themes, and then we're off. Yeah. And because I think it's fun to see what people have to say, and you provide a little bit of a context. You choose the people that are involved and the theme they play, and you think about their sounds, and then and then there you go.
Because you're not just riding in a vacuum. When you know the musicians that are going to be on your album.
Yeah. I think I love thinking about the people that are going to play the music. It gives you can sort of hear it, you know. You can be like, oh man, that's going to work with them. Yeah.
So what is it like writing for you? Are you sitting with the sax, or do you need the instrument in front of you, or
it's
get a melody in your head?
It's a few different things. I mean, sometimes there's a melody that starts appearing in my mind, and I find it like I'm like whistling it, or I sing it into my phone and then find it later. Yeah. Or sometimes if it's the first thing that happens when I sit down to practice, maybe a melody comes to me, and then I try to follow the thread, and then work on it and sculpt it from there. Okay. I've also written a fair amount of music that's like based around a process or an idea. If I wake up in the morning and I thought one day, well, what if I made a melody where each note was just a little bit farther away from the last note. Okay. So it's this always dramatically expanding. And so I wrote some music with that in mind. And a lot of times a constraint opens a path. Okay. And then I can follow it. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But you have to write a lot more than works out. Yeah.
How do you know when it works? When you get the musicians together, or can you tell that beforehand?
Well, sometimes I'm really excited about something, and then I put it in front of people and it doesn't work. Yeah. And that could happen a few times in a row, and I think, oh man, maybe this isn't cool. But then it gets put in the front of the right people, and because I wasn't thinking of anyone in particular when I wrote it, and then it works. Okay. And you're like, oh, maybe I just had it in the wrong zone. Or sometimes it takes someone else's perspective to say, maybe it should be a little different. Maybe we approach it in a different tempo or in a different, with a different thought in mind, and then it'll turn into something else, and that'll work, and that's cool. Okay. And then sometimes, conversely, I'm like, I don't really know about this. This is a half of a thought, and I just want to see. And then it was like, oh, great, this works. Okay. And I tend to like to play with people that respond well to less information.
Or you don't have to tell them like every little bit.
Exactly. Yeah. And also when we can have a conversation about the building blocks of the song. So I can say, well, here's the little generating idea, and this is the way that idea works throughout the melody. And so it's here and here and here. Yeah. And then that becomes a piece of information that informs the improvising. That's a little bit more abstract than maybe, but also keeps everything tied together than telling them, I don't know, all the harmony and everything to say.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And when did you learn all that?
I wanted to let go.
Well, when did you learn that? Like how to write for other people and what you want from them?
Well, I had a few different collective projects over the years. It started with Manor Effect with Sarah Charles, and we wrote.
We love Sarah Elizabeth
Charles.
Yeah.
And we wrote a lot of music together. And there were some times I wrote a few songs for that band that we didn't really play, but I was imagining the band when I did it, and it made sense to me, but they didn't grab.
Yeah.
And then I have a band with some friends called Walking Distance, and that music is like super collaborative, and we have 2 albums, and the second one's coming out in September. And I would know that I was writing it, and they were going to play it.
Yeah.
And for example, the bass player in that band, Adam Cote, is extremely adept on the bass. So I would know that if I wanted him to play something exceptionally difficult, he would both be able to do it and be willing to figure it out.
Okay.
And because the band was spending a lot of time rehearsing and working on the music. So but in other situations where you don't have months of rehearsal to figure it out, or you don't want to prescribe something that difficult to somebody, you're going to make a different choice.
Yeah.
Or maybe they don't sound as good doing that particular thing, or maybe you want to get the sound of for a bass player to really occupy the bass role and be this big supportive voice.
Yeah.
Then you would write something more in that, or I would give a more difficult part to someone else, or I have a trio with a couple of friends, and with them, a bass player Noah might play the melody with me, but I can hear that when I'm writing it.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, this is going to be bass and saxophone together.
Okay.
And it just gives it a little direction, a little shape.
Okay.
There's famous stories about Duke Ellington writing every part for his orchestra specifically for the person that's sitting in the seat, and people talk about that as one of the reasons the orchestra was so special, is that the soloists had parts really written for them. Whoever had the melody, it really fit their style, it fit the sound they get in the instrument and whatever.
Okay.
So there's plenty of examples of people having done that before.
Yeah. Almost like when an actor has a role written for them.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Totally.
How many groups are you in? I asked this of Sarah.
Yeah. Well, there are different levels of activity depending on the time, but
Manor Effect.
Manor Effect is
over,
off the map. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But I'll just list them, I guess.
Okay.
Because then that'll be easier. So there's Walking Distance, and this trio that I just mentioned with Noah Garabedian and Vinny Speranza, and then my friend Josh Lawrence, his band Color Theory, and then the Orrin Evans is Captain Black Big Band.
Okay.
So I'm afraid I'm going to miss one, and that's going to be really embarrassing. And I play in the Fat Gap Big Band, and I think those are the main ones that have somewhat regular appearances. There are other bands that I sub in, or that I really like being in, that I wish I was in. And there's a lot of musicians that I play with that is not like a group.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess 5 or so.
Okay, that's good.
And they morph over the years. Sometimes someone's really busy for a while, and then they move somewhere else, or they do something else, and it changes. Okay. But I like these ones right now are pretty cool.
Yeah. And when did your first album as a band leader come out?
This one.
Okay, this is the first.
This is the first one.
I think there was another one before.
Yeah. Well, there's a Walking Distance album called Neighborhood. That was
that's what I was thinking.
Right, and I wrote a lot of the music on that, but the music is very collaborative, developed collaboratively over a year or so.
Okay. So Brothers is the premiere.
Brothers is the first one under my name.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how long have this been brewing?
I've been thinking about doing it for 2.5 years, and then finally we recorded 1.5 years ago, and then the process of putting it out just takes time. And working with my friend Orrin that put the record out on his label, and working with his time frame and finding the time to put it out and whatever, getting the artwork together and mixing and mastering and all these things. So, but I think by the time it happened, the recording happened. Well, the recording happened on 10 days notice. Okay. He said, "Can you record in 10 days?" And I was like, yeah. I'll make that happen. Sure.
Did you have all the songs written? Or?
Yeah, I had been sort of gearing up for it, thinking it was going to happen soon. And so then I polished up a few things and had to think of, okay, well, we're going to do it in 10 days. So what's the best approach, or 10 days from now, what's in one day in the studio? So what's the best approach for me to get the most out of this?
Okay, so in 10 days, one day.
In 10 days, one day in the studio,
Okay, I'm thinking it's 10 days of recording.
No, 1 day. 6 hours of recording. So it was like, in 10 days, 6 hours of recording, what am I going to have prepared for that? So that has a certain set of limitations, in terms of what can be asked of the musicians that are going to be there, how intricate the compositions can be or not. And then also a willingness to accept the product of the moment and not have too many expectations to be, disappointed about. And it's, really different than the past records that I've been involved with so closely. Both of the Walking Distance records were made on like months of rehearsals and workshopping, like a year or more of workshopping the music. And then the Manor Effect records were the same, like forever, coming up with all the detail and then the recording process to match that. And, which is really, at the end, you have something that is full of like little surprises and choices. But it's a different process and it's a bit heavier, So this one was a nice exercise in seeing what it was like. Did
you get a chance to rehearse them
before this record? No.
Okay, so like, what did you do? Like, you sent everyone their parts? Okay, and then they would come prepared.
And they were prepared. And it wasn't as if we hadn't played together. So I had played, at more than a few gigs with everybody, most of the guys that were on the record, and then there's Orrin Evans, who produced it. Everyone on the record is sort of in his orbit. So there's a lot of mutual understanding and willingness to be open, and these things that were already there. And so I didn't have to worry about getting everyone on the same page musically. And especially when I just wanted them to play, I didn't have very many prescribed moments I wanted to happen. And even things that I wanted a different way, when we would record and Orrin is in there listening, and he says, "Oh, you got it." And I was like, "Well, could we do one more that was a little more like," and he's like, "No, you got it. Time to move on." And I think that's a great lesson. I mean, they came out a little differently than I expected, but I like it this way too. It's just not something I would have thought of necessarily. Some people exert a lot of control over, they like very specific compositions where they say, "Oh, I want, this really has to hook up with this, and this has to be here and here and here, and then this improvised moment is like a little setup for this, and then, it's like a narrative." And I'm not that kind of composer, so it's not like that.
Did you have a sound in mind, or like goals you hoped you would reach with this album?
Well, I had a sound in mind in terms of the people that were going to play.
And that they would give you.
And I wanted my main goal for the process of recording was to enjoy myself and to not be stressed out by the moment and the environment, because if I could let go and laugh and enjoy and not be worried, then I was pretty sure that I would like it. And I think that's true. It's hard, and having someone in there to help you, guide you through the process, to say, "You got it, that's the take," or "You have everything you need, move on," is really helpful, because then you're not stressed. Like, maybe we didn't get it. Time to do one more. Let's do one more, and then you keep doing that, and it takes the energy away from everyone. And then, is that what you mean for goals, or were you?
Did you have some sort of objective?
Well,
for the album?
The objective was to have fun and let everyone play, and to try to get something down so I could have a first album, and I could start moving on from that. I think for a long time, I didn't really have, if I wanted to try to get a gig under my name somewhere, I didn't have anything to show them. I had these collective projects where I said, well, there's this band and there's this band and there's this, this other thing, but I don't have something like that. And I want to have something like that.
Yeah. So it could look like it's the objective of other people if you're
right.
Yeah, you're not.
Yeah,
not the
or something.
leader.
Occasionally someone's like interested. It's like, well, what do you have to say?
Yeah.
And now I feel like I have a bit more of an idea of what I have to say, and having a project where I can, like we just had the CD release gig at the Jazz Gallery, and we were rehearsing for that actually.
Yeah.
And I thought, I know what this band sounds like between the record and this moment and these songs. Now I could write more music for this.
Okay.
And I know where I would like it to be, to push a little harder, or or be a little bit more aggressive or soft, like where the edges of the sound of the band is. Yeah. And so I'm excited to try to explore that and find more music that works in that context.
Yeah. Well, it's a great album.
Thanks.
Yeah, I enjoyed listening to it.
Yeah.
Okay. And the cover?
Yeah, the cover.
The cover, is that what you...
Yeah, it's me and my brother.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I was kind of assuming.
Yeah. It's one thing I like about it, which I think is a little mean to point out, is that he's got snot on his face. Which I think goes with the brother's idea. But that I think the thing about the cover is that I'm pretty sure I'm never going to look at that and be like, what a dumb choice you made.
Yes.
Yes. And I can look at that and remember and think about my brother and the place those photos were taken. Yeah. Because there's two photos that were combined into one.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah. But they were taken moments apart in the same place. But I can remember this thing a little bit, and I'm trying to find ways to connect myself directly to the music. Yeah. And sometimes it's just by calling, like naming a song something, or because especially with instrumental music, it can be hard to feel like what's the real personal connection to this song other than the melody or this album. It's like, and that's something that I feel good. I feel strongly about my brother and the brothers thing, and then also my relationship with the musicians on the record. And there's a brotherly relationship there. Everyone feels very open and close, and when everyone feels that way, the music has possibility in it. I also think that when you play music together, you have the shared experience bond that happens when people go through any kind of emotionally intense thing or any kind of difficult thing. And sometimes you play music with someone and then you don't see them for 6 months and you just played one time, but you feel this like, oh man, you feel all love for them. And it's hard to find that. It can be hard to find that in other ways, at least for me. So that's something I like to feel close to. Okay. And my mom took those photos, and they're on an island that we went camping on 20 times. Okay. So it's like, there's a lot in it that doesn't have to be said that is like, that will keep me attached to it.
It's funny you said about the connection once, because it's like, I feel that with every interview.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of weird, like if I go to someone's show like 2 years later and like, oh, they're like surprised. I'm like, well, I always feel this connection to people once we do an interview.
Sure, yeah. Because when do you sit down and have a conversation?
Yeah, for an hour.
Yeah, for an hour. Yeah, it doesn't happen really.
No. Dude, so what do you got coming next year? Like promoting the album?
Yeah. Well, I'm promoting this and working on trying to get some shows. And, and then I have the second Walking Distance album comes out in late September, and we have our CD release at the Jazz Standard, and then I'm going to record with the trio I mentioned. We have we've recorded some already, and we'll record more, and then I want to do another album with my band around the end of the year. And I want to stay connected to the recording process. I like the idea that it's creating like evidence of existence, you know, and still to feel connected to the idea of making an album and not individual songs. And it's a way to document the process. So as long as I still have opportunities to document and create more.
Yeah.
You know, and you learn so much from recording and learn about, like, one thing I noticed on the record is that there's a lot of, that I didn't expect, which I think is cool. So there's a lot of open space.
Okay.
There's a lot of, like, there's a lot of slow, long notes and textural things that I didn't plan for necessarily, but there was a lot of it in the songs.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, well, I like that. No wonder there's a lot of it, you know? But it took making the recording to realize that. And now it's something I can say, oh, well, if I like that, then let me investigate it a little bit, because then ultimately you want to make music that's about the things that I like, that it reflects my values somehow. So yeah, those are, I mean, I'm working on those things.
Okay.
And see where it takes it.
And you got, what's the Freebird album?
Yeah, that's the Walking Distance
Okay,
record.
that's the Walking Distance.
Yeah, so
Jason Moran?
with Jason Moran.
Okay.
It's called Freebird.
Okay.
Sunnyside Records.
Okay, I'm looking forward to hearing that.
Yeah, I'm excited. That was recorded even before this one.
Okay, so it's already in the can.
I mean, we recorded that over 2 years ago, and I'm like, let's get this thing out, you know? Let people hear it. That was a 2 or 3 year long project in terms of writing the music, and then we workshopped it for a long time, every week for a year or more, and then we recorded, and then we mixed the record for almost a year, and it was like an insane process. But we had our friend Ben Rubin that produced it had this idea that each song has its own character, which we were into that, and we were thinking about the songs as little character pieces and vignettes, so that we don't have to. Each one doesn't have to have everything. You know, like this one can just be a little, like, sing-songy song. You know, it could be 2 minutes long, and we'll move on. And so Ben wanted to record every song differently. And normally when you do a jazz record, you go into the studio and you set up and you record all the music as fast as you can.
Like 6 hours.
Yeah, because you have 6 or 8 hours or whatever. So he said, well, let's take advantage of the recording process and get different sounds for everything that match the character of the songs. So we do that, we did 2 days, which was like really long, but fun. I wish we had 3. Yeah. And then we spent all this time mixing each song to try to enhance the character of the song. And that took just forever.
Yeah.
But I think it ends up with something cool. I'm curious to see whether people connect with that, or if they notice it, or if it blends into the experience of the album. And I mean, any of those are cool. Yeah. But yeah, you know, there were a lot of choices that we made along the way. And then someone asked me about some of the songs recently, and I was like, oh, I have answers.
Yeah,
you know? Which was cool to realize. It was like, well, yeah, we thought about that for a while. And we had like heavy arguments about stuff. And things that, like, really minute, you know, like, I don't know, maybe it should get louder there. Should it be louder? No. You know, like, and then just like, bam. You know?
Which is like the other end of what you did with Brothers.
Yeah. And, but I like that too. That music also has freedom in it. But yeah, so I'm excited for these things to get out and to play some concerts. And Walking Distance is going to Europe in late February, and keep, you know, exploring these things. Captain Black Big Band has a record coming out the same day as Freebird. So, and Josh Lawrence, who plays trumpet on Brothers, we're going to do an album this fall that's all based on visual art. And I think we're going to record like a concert film at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. And so these things, everything's developing. And I really am enjoying that process, the process of watching things take on their own lives, you know.
Good for you, Caleb. And best place for people to catch up with you, the website? Yeah,
calebcurtis.com.
Okay.
Yeah, and I try to keep that pretty up to date. I think I'm pretty good at keeping it up to date. But I do post on Instagram and Facebook and those things. You know, sometimes I wish that I didn't have to. It's not that I dislike it. Maybe Facebook bothers me more. But we don't really have a choice as a performing artist. You know, you have to give people some way to connect. And I mean, I'm into that.
Yeah.
But I wish we could connect a little bit more on a personal level, you know.
Especially when you're releasing 20 albums this year, right?
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Caleb.
Thank
this
you,
was
boys.
wonderful.
Yeah,
I
it was
enjoyed
really
it.
nice.
Two from Caleb Wheeler Curtis, two from Brothers, The Fallacy of Ancient Wisdom, and before that, Brothers, the title track. Follow him online at calebcurtis.com. I'm online, of course, at talkmusictalk.com for more podcast information. You can also follow me online, social media at Instagram, Facebook, Twitter by linking to at This Is Boice. Call to actions for you. If you enjoyed this episode with Caleb, please share it on social media. You can also leave a 5-star rating and or review wherever you are listening, especially on iTunes, because this all helps to grow the Talk Music Talk audience. And there is also a Talk Music Talk app. It is free wherever you like to get your apps, or you can subscribe to the podcast pretty much anywhere you can stream or subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Play. Just search for Talk Music Talk. And you can also find the podcast starting with episode 100 on SoundCloud at soundcloud.com/This Is Boice. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, and there will be a next time, this one's for you, Liz.